Well, good afternoon and welcome to Live Impact News right here on 13 News Now, the app. It is 1 o'clock p.m. on the dot. It's May 12th. It is a Tuesday afternoon. It is bright and sunny and warm, but with a little bit of breeze outside. We're going to have a forecast coming for you later that is just looking absolutely delectable for the upcoming weekend. Perhaps a trip to the beach is in order for super producer Nia Campbell. Nia, is that true?
Is a beach day in store for me?
Yes.
No.
Many other events.
Many other events.
What
yes.
kinds, what things?
We're just going to have a slam-packed weekend. It's going to be fun. It's going to be busy. We're going to be moving. It's going to be feeling good outside.
It's only Tuesday, y'all. Okay, we still have the whole rest of the week to try to see if we can figure out what events Nia Campbell's going to be attending this weekend. For the time being, though, we have many, many events that we need to attend to here on Live Impact News. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of some of the things that have been happening this morning. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has appeared before multiple congressional committees to continue discussing that 2027 budget request. The $1.5 trillion increase that the Pentagon has in that proposed 2027 budget has been the subject of many a headline here as we move throughout the series of committee hearings that have taken place in regards to that. We also have an event that is in a bit of a brief recess right now, but that we believe will be coming back on live at some point, and that is a hearing on the Epstein investigation featuring Oversight Committee Democrats and with testimony, at least in the earlier portion of the day, testimony from victims, survivors, and the families of victims in regards to all of the alleged crimes against Jeffrey Epstein. So all of those events kind of happening throughout the morning and into the afternoon. We hope and plan on visiting with them as they sort of come back from their various recesses and things of that nature. However, there were quite a few other events that took place this morning that have ended completely. One of them just around 11:30 a.m., a press conference regarding Frontier Airlines. Frontier Airlines was actually in our shows on 13 News Now yesterday because there is harrowing video and a tragic story of a woman who wandered out onto the runway while a Frontier plane was getting ready to take off. She was hit and killed by that Frontier plane. It caused something of an explosion sort of on the exterior of the plane itself. The plane was deboarded. A scary situation all around and a situation that did turn tragic. There are still many, many questions as to how she got to the runway and why she was on the runway. And so we had a press conference from Frontier officials earlier today. That is where we are going to begin our news coverage. However, we do not go to that just yet because we have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Taylor Stephenson to the studio. Taylor, you arrived a little earlier than we were expecting. How did the noon go? Everything smooth?
Yeah, it was fine. After I found my clicker, I couldn't find my clicker at first. I was like, so where'd it go?
See, that is, people watching at home may not know that all of those graphics and images and 7-day forecasts and radar, all that you see on the screen, our meteorologists are doing that themselves with a clicker in hand live on air. So what did you do without the clicker?
I just controlled it from the computer and then tried to find the clicker. I think Craig was just playing hide and seek with me, honestly.
Craig Moeller, one
yes,
of our meteorologists.
Yeah,
Where was it?
It was not in a typical place. It was in our weather center by one of the other computers, and both of them were there because we usually have two.
Yeah.
So I was like, not both of them are missing. I was like, okay. So I found them literally after I finished, the first few minutes of the show.
It's so out of character for him. Craig Moeller, not known for shenanigans, never goofing off. Never, none of that. So that is strange. We will get to the bottom of this mystery. But first, we need to get to the bottom of some really intense temperature change that we're experiencing. But for many people, temperature changes for the better here.
Absolutely. I mean, today we're already 5 to 15 degrees warmer than this time yesterday for most of the area. North Carolina lingering behind just because they were in the 60s and 70s this time yesterday, but the rest of the area in those 50s. So a nice warm up definitely here for the Mid-Atlantic. Right now, temperatures area wide in the mid mid to upper 60s. We'll continue to climb just a little bit as high pressure takes control, and it's slowly making its trek to the east. As it does so, it will keep us dry today and tomorrow for the majority of the day on your Wednesday, and then it will also bring our south winds in play. Those south winds will usher in warmer temperatures for Wednesday. So as we walk through the rest of your forecast here, you can see that temperatures will climb just slightly to the upper 60s and low 70s for most places. We'll see some temperatures in the 50s and 60s around the coast, but otherwise a pleasant day. This is still, though, below normal, even though it is comfortable. We'll be about 5 degrees below normal for this time of year. Someplace around the coast around 10 degrees below where we should be. Our normal high temperature this time of year is around 76 to 77 degrees. So we will see those temperatures getting closer to that tomorrow. South winds are in play, and those south winds pump in that warmer air. So even around and just slightly after sunset, we'll still be in the mid to upper 70s. So for those who may be watching Live Impact while you're, taking maybe your lunch break, or you're at the doctor's office, you still have time later on today to get in some of that sunshine, vitamin D, or even after sunset, some warmer temperatures. But it's tomorrow that's going to be even more comfortable. Temperatures in the mid to upper 70s, a few passing clouds during the afternoon. And then I'm watching for our next system to arrive late on Wednesday into Thursday. That'll bring us some rain very early Thursday morning into your Thursday commute to the morning commute for work and school. But after that, we clear out fairly quickly. Heat builds into the weekend, and the heat is here to stay. We're hot for the weekend, hot for early to middle parts of next week. So here's a look at that cold front as it progresses through the mid-Atlantic states. You can see the rain starting to come in right around 2 to 3 a.m. for the peninsulas, and then bringing us some showers for the morning commute, and then finally fizzling out pretty quickly by about 1 to 2 p.m. on your Thursday afternoon, leaving us with a few clouds. But thankfully, that cold front not really bringing in that cooler weather. We'll be near 80 tomorrow, but by Thursday and Friday, we're in the mid-70s. But the weekend is what everybody's looking ahead to. Upper 80s, low 90s, and those 90s can stick around through Wednesday or Thursday of next week.
All right, so people think, it's going to get hot, and even at this stage of May, we're thinking, wow, high 70s, low 80s.
Right.
We're talking 90s here, and a little prolonged stretch in the 90s. So break out the sunscreen. As Nia and I were talking about, maybe consider a beach day in your future and try to enjoy this warmth that we're getting here. Nia, you said you are going to the beach, correct?
I said I am not going to the beach.
Shoot.
He really wants me to go to the beach this weekend.
No,
Why?
It's not that I want Nia to go to the beach. It's that I'm trying to figure out what's on the docket for Nia Campbell this weekend. It's a beautiful weekend. She's got a full schedule.
Can you give us a little taste of one thing?
A little taste. I will be outside.
Fair enough. Taylor,
I
we
guess.
gotta settle
That wasn't
for
what I was looking for, but it's
Taylor,
all right.
we gotta settle for that. That's
Yeah.
pretty good as far as Nia Campbell goes in terms of the deets. But hey, it's only Tuesday.
That's true.
You know,
you got 3 more days to try to fish it out of her.
Exactly. By the end of this week, she's gonna be like, I'm gonna be at PBR at 9 p.m. I'm gonna be waiting in line. I'm just kidding, Nia. We don't know what the case may be. All we know is it's going to be beautiful, sunny, and warm outside. Perhaps some showers Wednesday, Thursday, though not something that's we need to overly reckon with.
Oh, no, not anything too bad. I mean, even Wednesday, it looks probably maybe like 11 p.m., maybe even early Thursday. And the showers, I mean, they taper off by the early afternoon on Thursday.
Okay, good to know. A wonderful forecast from Taylor Stephenson. Taylor, we appreciate you. We'll see you at 4 o'clock.
I did the morning shows today, so I am
Stephenson
done.
is out of here. Speaking of being
Yes.
outside, Taylor Stephenson is done. Well, we appreciate you taking a few extra minutes of your shift here with us on Live Impact News.
Of course.
All right, we are going to take a commercial break. When we get back, all those events that we talked about are starting to come back online, in particular outside of where that Epstein victims hearing was happening. A press conference now from lawmakers. Perhaps we'll get some answers as to what's next in that investigation. For the time being, a quick commercial break here on Live Impact News. as we told you, there was a hearing going on before Democratic lawmakers involving testimony from victims and families of victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Those lawmakers have now taken to a podium outside of that hearing for a press conference. We're going to listen in live to that right now.
And many more. And in my own district of the Massachusetts 7th, My Life, My Choice, and the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center. This is a fight for all survivors.
Good afternoon. I'm Melanie Stansbury, and I am very deeply proud to represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District and to be part of a state delegation in New Mexico that is seeking to turn the Epstein files into Epstein trials. As we stand here today, New Mexico is the first and only state to pass a state law to investigate this case. And what I think is extraordinary about today, and I want to acknowledge Congresswoman Frankel, is that this is the first congressional hearing on this case to ever be held in West Palm Beach. Think about that. The first criminal allegation against Jeffrey Epstein happened more than 25 years ago in this community. Police looked the other way. Your state Attorney General looked the other way. Our national and federal attorney generals and investigatory bodies looked the other way. The FBI had gobs of evidence that there were criminal enterprises going on here in this community that included the exploitation of children, the trafficking of children across state lines, international trafficking of children and women, and financial crimes. And over the last 2.5 decades, not a single congressional hearing has been held on this case here in this community where it all started. And so I want to say thank you to Congresswoman Frankel and to our soon-to-be chair of the Oversight Committee, because we would not be here if it were not for them and for the survivors who were brave enough to show up today and to tell their stories on camera for the world to hear. Now, I just want to say this as I close out my comments. There are lots of discussions about the failure of the system to hold Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the potentially dozens of men who exploited young girls and trafficked and participated in the sexual exploitation of survivors. But this was not an isolated incident of failures of a system. This is a system that was designed to exploit children. It was a system that protected the wealthy and powerful, and it was a system that intentionally chose not to prosecute Jeffrey Epstein under federal law, which enabled him to commit potentially hundreds of other cases of rape, abuse, grooming, and transnational sex trafficking. That is not just system failure. That is a system that was designed to enable rich and powerful people to get away with anything that they wanted. And so we're here today to make sure that the voices of survivors, that the stories of survivors are heard not just in this community, but across the world, and to make sure that we take on that system directly. To say we are not going to stand for this one more moment, and to end the injustices that have allowed this to happen in this community and communities all across the country. And so we demand accountability, we demand action, we demand that Pam Bondi show up for her deposition, we demand that Donald Trump release the Epstein files, we demand that Todd Blanche actually prosecute these crimes, and we demand accountability for every single perpetrator that is still out there. We are coming for you.
I'm Emily Randall. I represent Washington State's 6th District, and I have been moved over and over and over by the stories of such brave women who are forced by a system of power to relive their trauma over and over and over in pursuit of justice. And what I hear from my neighbors, and I know that my colleagues hear from the American people across the country is that this case isn't only about survivors of Epstein's trafficking and sexual crimes, but it is about survivors everywhere who finally feel a little bit of hope that their stories will be listened to and that they will be able to imagine a future in which there is justice. But we're not there yet, because we still are experiencing a Department of Justice that is engaging in a massive cover-up. 2.5 million documents still unreleased in this Epstein investigation. And yet, the release over and over and over again, thousands of times, of the names and personally identifying information of survivors. There's nothing else to call that but witness intimidation, because it cannot be accidental, the number of times that co-conspirators and powerful men have their names redacted in the files and survivors' names are unredacted. No matter how many times they have asked for that privacy and protection, no matter how many women testified under the understanding that they would be identified as Jane Doe, we are seeing information about survivors who have already been traumatized over and over and over again be released as part of this cover-up and part of this intimidation strategy. We are going to continue to fight so that those who are actually culpable, the dozens, hundreds of people who are actually culpable, have their day in the sunlight, that we record their testimony, that we investigate this to the full extent, and we are committed every day to working alongside the survivors to ensure that they are protected to the best of our abilities. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Yasmin Ansari, Congresswoman from Arizona's 3rd District. I was a child just a few years younger than many of the women who testified today when Jeffrey Epstein was carrying out his heinous crimes right here in West Palm Beach. These women were girls at the time, over 1,000 girls. Girls who should have been protected, but girls who were failed by adults, by institutions, and by their government. And what happened here in West Palm Beach and across the country and across the world was not simply just about the evil of one man. It was a systemic failure that was shaped by inequality, by influence, and by impunity. All of this has been exacerbated by the most corrupt administration in American history, carrying out the most egregious cover-up in American history. And this systemic failure requires systemic solutions. In the minority, oversight Democrats, led by Ranking Member Garcia, have forced everything that has gotten us to this point today. We would not be here if it were not for Democrats on the Oversight Committee pushing every subpoena, pushing for these depositions, pushing for these transcribed interviews, pushing for Pam Bondi to come before the Oversight Committee. This has been an egregious cover-up by the Trump administration, but also a complete abdication of responsibility by Republicans on the Oversight Committee, barring a few, and by Republican Chairman James Comer. And we will continue, whether now or when we are in the majority, to make sure that every single person who enabled, who perpetrated, or who covered up these heinous crimes will be held accountable. And we know from what we heard from the women today, and we've known this, it's in the files, that there are rich and powerful men out there right now continuing to live their lives without any consequences. And we assure you that day will end.
Good afternoon, I'm James Walkinshaw from Virginia's 11th District. We're here today in Palm Beach County, ground zero, the center, the place where Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's massive child sex trafficking ring started. We're just miles from Mar-a-Lago, the place where the close friendship between Epstein and Donald Trump grew, where Virginia Giuffre was trafficked, and later raped by Jeffrey Epstein. And we heard today powerful stories from survivors, including Rosa from Uzbekistan, who was recruited and held hostage by the visa that Epstein controlled. Powerful stories. And I hope the world was watching. I specifically hope that Alex Acosta was watching, because we learned today from Rosa that she was raped time after time after time by Jeffrey Epstein while he was serving the sweetheart deal sentence that Alex Acosta gave him. While he was on unsupervised, very unsupervised release, he was continuing to commit the very crimes that women like Maria Farmer and others brought to the attention of the FBI decades ago. I hope another person was watching today. I hope Pam Bondi was watching. And I hope she saw the courage of the survivors here today who told their stories, in most cases, again, in front of all the cameras, with all of the bright lights for the world to see. And I hope Pam Bondi will feel some shame for the fact that she has tried time after time after time to avoid public accountability. She wants to answer questions behind closed doors, in private, where the world can't see it, in video. Well, Pam Bondi, that is not good enough. That is not good enough. You need to show 1 ounce of the courage that the women here today showed. They deserve your public testimony on video. The American people deserve it too. I'll go back to the ranking member.
Thank you. And we're going to open up for a couple questions. Before I do, I want to say a couple important things as we close. Number one, I hope today reminds the public that this investigation is not a hoax and that it's not over, and that unlike Todd Blanche, the acting AG, who just a week ago said that the DOJ was moving on from the Epstein investigation, we understand that it is alive and well and moving forward, and we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. And the second thing is, for this community, it's important for the folks of Palm Beach County, Palm Beach, West Palm Beach to understand and to know that there's a lot of folks that worked for law enforcement, that were lawyers involved in this case, that were investigators, or that have heard stories or know information or evidence that we want to access. So I encourage anyone from the Palm Beach community that may have information about Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, the crimes, or the cover-ups that happened, to please contact the Oversight Committee. We have a protected system, a whistleblower system, that we encourage you to please access if you have information that could help us in our investigation. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Your last interview now as the committee is scheduled for July 15th. Do you expect that there will be more before the election? How many and who, by name if you can, do each of you most want to hear from as your investigation continues?
Look, we're working right now through a list of additional subpoenas that we want to get through. Some we're communicating directly with the majority on, so we're waiting to see if they move on those or not. But I think it's safe to say that we're interested in speaking to anyone that was involved, particularly prosecutors that were involved in making recommendations about the sweetheart deal, what happened here in Palm Beach, and more broadly in some of the other cases that were brought forward to the government. That's one piece of folks we want to speak to. We also have additional questions for other folks that we believe were involved in assisting Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Some of those you and I discussed earlier, but we're not at this moment ready to release additional names.
If you win back the House in November, will you bring back the people that were already called in to testify, since they testified behind closed doors? There were no cameras, there's no transparency. Will you bring the survivors back so that they can actually be recorded into the Congressional Library and on the record? And who else do you plan to call? And will you call anyone from your own party?
So let me add, one is obviously, as it relates to survivors, we're never going to force a survivor to be compelled to speak in front of the committee, but any survivor that wants to speak and have the opportunity, absolutely. And we definitely have additional questions for folks that we've talked to. I'll take Alex Acosta as a very good example. We'll definitely have additional questions. As far as members from our party, we have been nonpartisan in our approach. We don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, we'll talk to you. And I think we said earlier that we have additional questions. I want to understand why Merrick Garland in the former Justice Department, under the Biden administration, did little to nothing to bring justice for the survivors or have additional prosecutions. And so Merrick Garland, for me, is at the top of that list of folks that we need to speak to and ask questions of. And I think there are a variety of other folks. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that. There's a variety of other folks that we want to speak with. Yes.
Yes, Representative Garcia, Dave Bowman, WPTV. It was hailed as a victory when the bill passed the House where the files were going to be released. And yet you heard today that while a few people abroad have been investigated, that the names of the survivors came out. What do you do moving forward to try to prevent that and to get names of the perpetrators released when your own survivors today said they don't have a lot of confidence in that?
Yeah, I mean, I put the blame squarely on former Attorney General Pam Bondi for that. She has had a direct hand in this cover-up from the beginning. Not only did they move slowly, but they were sloppy. We heard from survivors, as you mentioned, that their lives have been destroyed while names of men and co-conspirators who committed the crimes were redacted. So I think that there needs to be that's why we need to hear from Pam Bondi at the end of this month under oath on camera in front of the American people, because she is to blame for this, and there should be, I believe, accountability for her and for what she did here. She has ruined lives. I mean, we heard such devastating stories today about people's children hearing these stories for the first time, women whose details of their sexual assault and abuse was revealed because of the botching of this files. The law was very clear that any personally identifiable information as it pertains to survivors should have been redacted. This is not an accident. The Department of Justice chose to do this because they want to silence people. They want this to go away. Donald Trump has made that abundantly clear. He's directed his staff to make sure that happens, and I believe that the reason these mistakes were made was, again, not an accident and at the direction of Pam Bondi.
Yeah, go ahead.
And moreover, I would just say that what this proves, the fact that none of our Republican colleagues are here today. For Democrats, this is not a midterm campaign strategy. This is not about political gamesmanship or upsmanship, but clearly for them, fighting for the naming the Epstein files in their campaigning. The Epstein files, by the way, are real people. These are real people's lives, right? That was just purely political for them. As proven by their obstruction and by their defiance and their unwillingness to comply with legally binding subpoenas. And then finally, I would just say something that really just stayed with me today. There have been so many instances of insult to injury. Not only were vile acts committed by this vermin in their predator, pedophile Ponzi scheme that is a lifetime sentence for these survivors. This trauma is showing up and manifesting in their lives in so many ways. But it is insult to injury that there was an institutional betrayal by law enforcement, by the Department of Justice, and now today by House Republicans. And their rights were not honored in the Crime Victims' Rights Act. And the fact, as Congresswoman Randall speaks to, that their names have been unredacted. That was some of the most devastating testimony here today, this insult to injury. And in the words of Virginia Giuffre, we need to know who the monsters are. We need to follow every single road. We don't care if they're Democrat, Republican, independent, what state they live in, what their job is, if they're a politician, if they're a president, or if even they are a prince. We will follow all roads because this is not political for us. This is deeply personal. This is about these survivors and their families. And every monster, in the words of Virginia Giuffre, needs to be named and shamed because they could still be out committing these evil, vile acts.
Okay, last question.
All right, as they take that last question in their press conference following that hearing, we are going to go to commercial break here. Now, I think when we get back from commercial break, if nothing else live has come up for us, we are actually going to show you a little snippet of what occurred within the hearing itself, to give more context to the press conference that we just saw regarding this hearing on Jeffrey Epstein and the victims of his crimes. So let's take a commercial break. We'll be right back with more coverage of this story. All right, back here on Live Impact News. You heard the press conference following those House Democrat hearings about the Epstein investigation, and now we are going to hear a snippet from that hearing, especially victims giving their testimony. Let's listen in right now from a hearing that took place just earlier today.
So you came for opportunity?
Yes.
And we told you, right? We told the entire world, we've told the entire world, come to the United States for opportunity. This is a land of opportunity where you can be anyone, where you can do anything, right?
Yes. New York City was a top of a list for any model traveling and getting a contract.
Rosa, can you help us understand how Epstein, Brunel, and their associates used the promises of modeling jobs to recruit you and other women?
When you enter modeling, you have a dream of ending up and walking a Victoria's Secret show or on a cover of Vogue magazines. So when you're a teenager and somebody approaches you saying that they can be there to help you and be your word ally, I hate that word really, because that was used many, many times in trying to make me believe that they are my ally in order to get those jobs. So naturally, it comes across like these people care. And you believe them. Why? Because you were just a teenager. It doesn't look really scary to begin with, so they get your trust, and then they put you in a situation where financially you can't leave. The ticket back home cost $1,300 round trip. I was giving $100 a week in New York City to survive. And if any of you go to New York City today and try to live off $100, good luck.
Oh, yeah. Rosa, we also know that you're an immigrant, and we know that Epstein and his network also manipulated and threatened women using their visas or immigration status. Can you talk about your experience with this?
Every time I came to my agency or Epstein, which I didn't know why I came to him,
I begged them to let me go back to other places I used to model before, on which they said, why? You're not going to do well there, so stay here. What do you need? I would say, job. And then they offered me job. They didn't give me money to purchase a ticket, and I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have my parents sending me money. I couldn't afford a ticket back. So they used my dreams against me, saying that it's just a time and everything's going to be okay. And if I trust them, all my dreams are going to come true.
We know that he weaponized people's immigration status, right? And the fact that they were immigrants against them, to manipulate them, to force them into his horrible crimes and the horrible things he did to them. There are so many changes that need to come from this investigation. And I think it's important that we also remember immigrant women are disproportionately impacted by sex trafficking in the United States. Epstein exploited this broken immigration system to do these crimes. And I think your story and your testimony shows that, and many of the other stories and testimonies that we've heard. This investigation shows us that we have to fix this system, not just demonize immigrants. And in a moment where the same people that are obstructing this investigation, the same people who are engaged in the cover-up of this investigation are also the one demonizing immigrants across this country, shows us the real truth, that if we spent a modicum of the money and energy that this government is using to go terrorize our communities and round up innocent people, to go after the billionaire pedophiles and sex traffickers and people who have exploited this broken immigration system, maybe we'd had some justice here. And so just thank you so much for being here and sharing your testimony. I yield back.
And now I'll recognize Ms. Lee from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I want to start, like many, by just grounding us in the people who have too often been ignored. Survivors like Danny Bensky, who was just 17 when she was lured to work for Jeffrey Epstein with false promises that, and then threatened with her mother's illness. Rosa, who was trafficked across borders and abused for years. Courtney Wild, who not only survived abuse, but then had to lead a legal fight for recognition by a Department of Justice that was supposed to protect her. And Jenalisa Jones, who has sounded the alarm that a paltry release of DOJ files hints at a possible, probable cover-up. I just want to thank you all for being here, for continuing to show up, for your continued courage and your commitment to justice. We recognize that you are unfortunately four of very, very many more survivors. And I hope you know that your presence today means to survivors across this country how important it is to them. For decades, survivors have worked in good faith with law enforcement to try to expose Epstein and his co-conspirators, only to have their interests and their needs ignored. From a bogus non-prosecution agreement way back in 2008, to the inexcusable release of personal identifying information from Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche's DOJ. The DOJ seems perfectly capable of concealing the names of these rich and these powerful folks in the files that have been released, but they did not give that same level of care to the actual survivors. And here in Florida, Alex Acosta spent more time cutting a deal with Kenneth Starr, Alan Dershowitz, and other well-connected lawyers working for Epstein and with Epstein than he did actually listening to survivors. This sweetheart deal enabled Epstein to continue abusing survivors while he was out on work release, as we've heard. The DOJ has failed to indict any other perpetrator of sex trafficking beyond Epstein and Maxwell, despite all the complaints and the reports that other individuals were implicated and involved, including from survivors themselves who have named these people. They seem to have no plans to do so. So Todd Blanche stating that the Epstein files, quote, should not be a part of anything going forward, unquote, is where we need to spend a little time. This is a glaring proof of a two-tiered justice system of justice in this country. Mr. Kuven, this saga began with a failure at the state level when prosecutors declined to fully pursue justice against Jeffrey Epstein, right?
Correct.
You represented one of the first survivors in Florida. We saw a non-prosecution agreement that shielded Epstein and protected his associates. Can you explain why that agreement was so unusual and how harmful it was?
So first of all, as I said before, it was unusual because ordinarily the U.S. Attorney's Office would consult with counsel for the victims and talk about the potential charges that they're going to bring, and they never did that. They kept it secret. They would not answer phone calls. When I was able to get through to the U.S. attorney at the time, who was Maria Villafana, she said, I can't talk to you. Second, it was so unusual because it not only gave immunity to Jeffrey Epstein, who was the target of their investigation, but it gave immunity to co-conspirators without prosecution of those co-conspirators or even a hint of prosecution of 4 specifically named co-conspirators. Lastly, the most unusual part of that deal was that they added the phrase unnamed co-conspirators. I have never, in 30 years doing this, ever seen a non-prosecution agreement so broad as to say that they're giving immunity to unnamed individuals. It was a gift.
Ms. Wow, really quickly, can you tell us more about those emails between Epstein's lawyers and the prosecutors and what made them seem different from what you would think a typical plea negotiation would look like?
Yes, ma'am. When me and Brad Edwards we got the emails, it was literally friends. They were meeting at Starbucks, they were meeting off the record, wherever they wanted. These were friends literally negotiating how much time, what it would look like, what the charges were going to look like, what they were going to say during the grand jury. It was all scripted. It was all set up, cover up.
I just want to say really quickly, does any survivor have you felt protected or seen or heard by the government?
No, ma'am.
Just no.
The redactions, none of my information had been redacted.
This is about a system that asks survivors to carry the burden of proof, the burden of patience, the burden of pain, while people with wealth and power are given time and protection and silence. While we're here today because of Jeffrey Epstein, sexual abuse survivors across this country know all too well that he is not an anomaly, but he's a high-profile example of a system that too often works exactly as designed, to shield abusers and silence those that they harm. So to all the survivors, the fierce attorney advocates who are with us here today, I just want to thank you for coming forward despite the many frustrations, the threats, the dangers, and the setbacks that you've experienced. We have a responsibility to all survivors who are still waiting, to the ones who have never gotten justice, and to the ones watching right now to say that this ends here, and we take that very seriously. I thank you all so much, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lee. And now I am going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. I've been smiling probably more than I am supposed to as I've sat here because y'all bring me so much joy. And let me tell you why. The reason is this. It's because in spite or despite this incompetent government, y'all have not backed down. For some people, it is the very first time that they're seeing your faces, but you have been there when no cameras are rolling. You have been there for decades, and you are still showing up. The reality is that you are not a child in this moment, but you know that other children are potentially being subjected to something similar in this exact moment. And it is your courage that is contagious. We don't have that, unfortunately, in Congress. We got a bunch of cowards. But your courage is contagious. Think about it this way. One of the things that I really want to clarify, because I have had an opportunity to hear some of your stories and meet with some of you in person and behind closed doors, a lot of people who potentially are not on the right side of history right now, one of the common questions that they ask is, how is it that this could have happened to so many people, yet when you rolling, you have been there for decades and you are still showing up? The reality is that you are not a child in this moment, but you know that other children are potentially being subjected to something similar in this exact moment. And it is your courage that is contagious. We don't have that, unfortunately, in Congress. We got a bunch of cowards. But your courage is contagious. Think about it this way. One of the things that I really want to clarify, because I have had an opportunity to hear some of your stories and meet with some of you in person and behind closed doors, a lot of people who potentially are not on the right side of history right now, one of the common questions that they ask is, how is it that this could have happened to so many people, yet when you were going through your experience, You failed to see anybody else or know anything else, and you thought that you were all alone. And I know that that is something you have told me directly. So for the people that are watching and they're hearing numbers like, man, thousands of girls, but at the same time they're hearing, you know what, I never saw anything else. Whoever feels most comfortable, if you will, because for me, I don't think that I have that much confidence in the government overall doing what's right for the right reason, but it is the pressure from outside. It is you going out there and being courageous that has made the people rise up. That is why we were able to get some kind of movement. And so I want to build more allies for this movement right now. So if any of you would like to answer that question.
Thank you for that, first of all. But I think it starts with our young people knowing that they need to speak up. Because for me, I think I was pit against a friend of mine that went together to Jeffrey the first time, and he was very good at using the manipulation to hold us there. And so I felt like I couldn't tell anybody, and I didn't tell anybody. So I think it starts with the youngest, you know, if an experience feels off, to have a young person speak out and talk to even just a friend about that, and then say to that friend, hey, is this happening to you? Then the two of them can talk to an adult, and then we're already making change because we're already taking it out of the dark. I think the secrecy was the hardest part in my own abuse, and meeting all of the survivor sisters in September absolutely changed my whole life. And so I do think if you can find community and if you can find the people who boost you, it's really important, but it starts with our youngest survivors.
Thank you so much for that. And in fact, you brought up young survivors. You know, a quick question that I have for each of you is, do you believe that a child has the ability to consent to sex?
No.
Okay. Interestingly enough, most of the time our laws, whether they're state or federal, acknowledge that as well. But I have a transcript and I won't go through it, but it relates to the case that stemmed out of here where they were trying to make it seem as if a child victim was a criminal. That was the focus of their questioning. So it is so frustrating because literally when I was in the state house in Texas, this is one of the things that I actually worked on, was making sure we changed the actual language in the code, specifically as we talked about child victims. So that brings me to kind of where we are on the federal level. And I'm gonna wrap up because of the time. I wanna make sure we stay on time. My colleagues are nicer than I am. I'm gonna be real. They've used words like cover up, choice. For me, it's obstruction of justice. It's real clear, and that's just the lawyer in me. This is pure obstruction. Anyone else that would engage in this type of behavior would be charged with obstruction of justice, yet somehow, because it's the Department of Justice, the ones that are supposed to enforce justice and law in this country, we're not calling it a thing, but that's what it is. And so it is my hope that we understand that while these survivors have taken the time to come out, and some of them were outed unlawfully and absolutely need to have some semblance of justice because of that illegal outing, because our law was very clear, to be clear about that. I need people to understand that we all have a role to play. People in this moment keep asking, what is it that I can do? Well, I'm gonna be partisan as well, because they're not being partisan. The Republicans could have shown up today too. They didn't. So let me be clear, I am going to be full on partisan. You have to vote. If you care about this, you have to vote, and you have to understand who is fighting for you. There are certain things that were always a basic kind of standard in this country for what was right. We protected the most vulnerable amongst us. We're not doing that nowadays. We made sure that we believed in quote unquote law and order, but we're not doing that nowadays. It is time to wake up. It is time for us all to do our part because, again, I'm going to be partisan because only the Democrats decided to show up today. So with that, I will yield, and my next...
Okay, back here in the Live Impact studio, we just wanted to give everyone a sense of what was going on in that hearing following lawmakers' live press conference after its conclusion. So now we're going to move forward with more news of the day here, but only after this commercial break. President Trump is making his way to Joint Base Andrews now. He is scheduled to fly to China tonight, but first he has stopped on the White House lawn to speak to some reporters. We're going to take a commercial break. When we get back, we'll go out to that White House lawn and listen to what the president has to say. Welcome back into the Live Impact studio. Before we head out to the White House lawn, we have breaking news from the Associated Press here. The head of the Food and Drug Administration, Dr. Marty Makary, is resigning after a, quote, rocky tenure that drew months of complaints from health industry executives, anti-abortion activists, and other allies of President Trump. So drawing complaints from allies of President Trump, and now the head of the FDA, Dr. Marty Makary, resigning. He steps down after just over a year leading the regulatory agency. An announcement is expected Tuesday. Sources spoke to the Associated Press on the insistence of anonymity. Makary was a surgeon and a health researcher. He became somewhat notable for his outspoken critiques of COVID-19 health measures during the pandemic, frequently appearing on Fox News. He did struggle, according to this, to win the confidence of its staff, of the FDA's staff, after mass layoffs, leadership changes, and a series of controversies in which the agency's scientific principles appeared to be overridden by political interests, including those of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Again, that particular paragraph is directly from the Associated Press reporting. That is the breaking news. That is another member of President Trump's cabinet who is out before year 2 is complete of his first term, joining Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem, and others. And so now let's go live out to President Trump, see if he has comment on this or any litany of other topics.
Stock market, which is already at the highest point in history, go through the roof. You're going to see the golden age of America, frankly, and you're seeing it now. So as soon as this is, don't forget, you have hundreds of ships that are loaded up with oil that want to come out. As soon as they come out, we're going to have a gusher of oil, and you're going to have inflation that goes way down. Now, with all of this, inflation is much lower than it was under Biden. Biden had the highest inflation.
All right, we're actually going to switch the audio here, see if we can get a more clear audio option from our live feeds.
And now what you have is, as soon as this war is over, you're going to see inflation go go down to probably 1.5%. Your message is right.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Mr. President, yesterday you said the Great Assyrian arms from the state of Odessa. A U.S. military official said that the Kurds have not received any arms, and the Kurdish political parties are denying receiving any
The
arms.
officials are wrong.
Your message is Chinese people, sir, and the summit.
It is always a bit of a chore getting clean audio during these particular types of press opportunities as President Trump walks sort of along the line there on his way to the airplane to head to Joint Base Andrews, and then eventually later on tonight on to China for a summit with President Xi Jinping. Now, you heard him speaking about some economic indicators there. U.S. consumer prices sharply up again last month as the war with Iran led to higher gasoline prices. The Labor Department's Consumer Price Index rose 3.8% from April, the biggest jump in 3 years, and up from a 3.3% year-over-year gain in March. On a month-to-month basis, April prices rose 0.6% from March, as gasoline prices rose 5.4%, according to data released by the Labor Department on Tuesday. The month-over-month gain was down from according to a Labor Department data. The month-over-month gain was down from a 0.9% increase in overall prices from February to March when the initial shock from the war hit the U.S. economy. I know that sort of just reading over figures here is not always the most entertaining way to report on this, but since President Trump was touching on it, we wanted to make sure that we included this as well. Let's see here. Even if you take out food and energy costs, which can be volatile, consumer core prices rose 0.4% last month from March and 2.8% from April of 2025, a year ago. These are considered to be modest readings that suggest the energy price burst has yet to spill over more broadly into prices of other goods. We've talked about that a little bit with Patrick DeHaan from Gas Money about how energy prices and gasoline prices is one sector of the global economy that can eventually lead to a rise in prices of many, many other industries, as so many depend on gasoline and fuel to maneuver their products throughout the globe and throughout the country. All right, let's listen in one more time and see if we can actually get ears on some of President Trump's press availability happening outside the White House right now.
He's going to go on and he's going to do well. Everybody wants that job.
So the midterm would you send the National Guard or ICE to voting locations in November? Would you do that?
Well, you know what? I'd do anything necessary to make sure we have honest elections. We have to have honest elections.
So you're not ruling that out?
The war in Ukraine, I really think it's getting very close.
China invest $1 trillion in the U.S. Will China invest $1 trillion in the U.S.? When you're negotiating with Iran, Mr. President, to what extent are American financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about American financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all. That's the only thing that matters.
Mr. President, will China invest $1 trillion in the U.S. or in NATO?
Dan? What is more broken, NATO or OPEC? Well, OPEC is having some difficulty right now because of one of those things, but that has nothing to do with me. NATO was very disappointing to me. NATO was not there when we wanted them. We don't need NATO. We don't need NATO. But if we did need them, they just weren't there.
He can help and contribute to a deal with Iran.
He could. I mean, it might be. I don't think we need any help with Iran, to be honest with you. They're defeated militarily, and they'll either do the right thing or we'll finish the job. They're either going to do the right thing or we're just going to finish the job.
The message there to the Chinese people as you embark on this summit.
That we're going to have a great relationship for many, many decades to come. My relationship with President Xi is a fantastic one. We've always gotten along, and we're doing very well with China. And working with China has been very good. So we look forward to it. As you know, President Xi will be coming here toward the end of the year, so that'll be exciting too. I only wish we had the ballroom finished. The ballroom is right on budget and ahead of schedule, but I wish we had it finished now. You also may want to do one other thing. You may want to go see the reflecting pool, because that's under construction, and for the first time since 1922, it's going to work properly.
Sure, and the gas tax in Congress.
All right, everybody. Between the war in Iran, the rising gas prices, the recent news that the head of the FDA is resigning, the trip to China to meet with President Xi Jinping, we did want to hear from President Trump, but the audio is just too poor in those particular live feeds, so we are not going to spend a whole lot more time with that. So, unless the audio does improve, in which case we'll revisit. For the time being, Naya, what do you think here? Because I would say that maybe we talked at the beginning of the show about listening in on the Frontier press conference. Before we went to weather, before Taylor got here, we thought we'd have a little time to talk about or to listen to Frontier executives and others speaking about the individual who wandered onto a runway and was hit and killed by a Frontier airplane yesterday. What do you say we go to that now, since we're having some trouble with audio at the White House?
I think we can take a break first.
You gonna break first? Okay, let's do a quick commercial break, and then we'll go out to that hearing, to that press conference. All right, welcome back to Live Impact News. Now, we have been running into, this has just been scheduling mishaps for us today here on Live Impact News. We appreciate everyone bearing with us. We're trying to get everything in as we can. There's a live event that's about to start. It's a Beagle activist press conference. We've reported on this story quite a bit. There's an initiative to save beagles throughout the country. Yes, the dog, a dog that many cherish as pets. And we've reported on this on 13 News Now. The press conference is beginning as we speak. I wonder if we go to that live, since it is happening right now, and then we can always go back to our Frontier Airlines press conference, which happened just before the show, and which we have ready to go at any time. So I think we will go out to the Beagle activist press conference. That is a story, again, that has drawn quite a bit of national interest, as there has been this concerted effort by animal rights activists to save beagles. And this has been raids on certain farms where beagles have been rescued. We in particular reported on a raid at a farm in Wisconsin that resulted in the rescue of 22 beagles back in March, and eventually an agreement to release 1,500 of the dogs, with inhumane conditions being alleged against the owners here at that farm in Wisconsin. And so this story continues on here, and this is the Beagle Freedom Project. We're going to listen in now to what has been a very unique movement.
Mike person here.
It's Mike. Mike's the Mike guy.
No?
It's coming in through the live stream.
Is it?
Yes.
Coming through the live stream? Okay. All right. I'll be nice and loud. So this week wraps up the movement of 1,500 beagles from Ridgeland Farms to animal welfare groups. And I think many of you who've been following this issue know that the Center for Humane Economy and Big Dog Ranch Rescue, represented by Joseph Good, Milwaukee-based attorney, former chair of the board of the Dane County Humane Society, was instrumental in negotiating this agreement. And Joe, we're so grateful for the life-saving work that you have done. This started a week ago Friday, so we've been running for about 12, 13 days, and no movement of animals on the weekends. So it started. So last week there were several days of movement of animals. The Friday before, I was able to go on the first day to Ridgeland Farms and to take dogs out. And those dogs went to Big Dog Ranch Rescue, which is working with hundreds of rescue organizations around the country. This set of animals are really going to be administered first and foremost by Beagle Freedom Project. So we're so excited to have our partners at Beagle Freedom, which has done amazing work to take animals from laboratory type settings or suppliers and get those animals into loving homes. And I will tell you, it's not a tough sell to get beagles into homes. The response around the nation has been overwhelming, and it is just quite extraordinary to see how many people have opened up their hearts to these animals and who want them to live a full, complete, safe life. There is intense competition among people for more of the animals, and we hope through our larger political efforts and our negotiations that we'll see more animals come out of laboratory animal breeding suppliers and the labs directly. We hope soon to close this era of testing on dogs and primates and other animals. This is no longer morally acceptable, and it is scientifically suspect at best. I've been working on this issue for many years, and the Center for Humane Economy and Animal Wellness Action spearheaded the FDA Modernization Act, and it was introduced in the Congress in 2021. It passed at the end of 2022 as the FDA Modernization Act 2.0. And this was such a consequential federal action for animals and laboratories. it eliminated an animal testing mandate for every new drug that was being conceived of by a drug developer, pharmaceutical companies and others. And for 84 years, from 1938 to 2022, it was a requirement to use beagles or primates as so-called higher mammals, as well as rabbits, rats, mice, and a range of other species. And the data show after these 8 decades that in 90% of the cases where a drug passed muster in the extensive multi-species animal tests, and they look at 2 issues: the safety of the drug, to see if you take the drug and it will cause adverse reactions, and then the second test is the efficacy or the effectiveness of a drug, that the drug does as advertised. If it's an anti-cancer drug, does it do that work? If it's an anti-pain drug, does it do its work? If it's an anti-obesity drug, does it do its work? In what kind of world is it acceptable to have a 90% failure rate for the animal test translating to the human condition? This is one major explanation, this waste of all these animal lives, all this money. It costs $2 billion for a drug to get to market these days, and 9 of 10 of them fail because the animal tests have sent us in the wrong direction. We have 21st century strategies that are grounded on human biology. Organoids, organs on a chip, computational toxicology, artificial intelligence. In what world do we use 1930 strategies in a realm of science and development? We can do so much better, and now we're liberated because of the FDA Modernization Act. And what's happened with Ridgeland Farms and other suppliers is that their traditional markets are slowly eroding because new technologies are superior. And I'm just so excited that we're able to help with these animals who were destined for a laboratory setting, to be subjected to, treatments and drugs and toxic substances that would cause them distress, and in many cases death. And I know you'll hear from our incredible panel today that these are remarkable little creatures. They are adorable, and they are temperamentally extraordinary. To be out at Ridgeland today and to take some of these animals out with so many folks from Beagle Freedom Project and from Dane County Humane Society and others who've been committed to these animals, I think we all felt a really special moment in that regard. And I think really to commemorate this occasion, it was really fitting that Geezer Butler joined us today. He flew in this morning. I think many of you, everybody, I think, who's alive and alert to the world.
All right, so a brief look at the Beagle rescue effort that has been happening, that we've been reporting on. You could even, I think, hear some dogs sort of barking in the background. You see Debbie Gibson, a famous singer there, also sitting behind the speaker, holding a dog in her arms. But we come out of that press conference because A, I dropped my pencil, don't be alarmed, but B, John Thune has taken the podium on Capitol Hill. Let's listen in to Senator John Thune right now.
Law enforcement defund police movement with which they have been associated for some time, now to continue and have blocked funding for the Department of Homeland Security, for ICE, for Customs and Border Patrol, the folks who keep our border safe and secure, and have been blocking it now for several months. And as a consequence, we will have to move forward, and we will next week, with the Secure America Act, which is a bill that will fund those critical law enforcement agencies and ensure that they're funded not only today, but into the future through the duration of President Trump's term. So, like I said, I think it's shameful that we are even having to have a conversation like this, but we have a Democrat Party that has embraced the ideas of open borders and defunding the police. And as a consequence of that, we're having to deal in a way that allows us to do this with Republican votes, because Republicans have law enforcement's back, and we will do everything that we can to ensure that they have all they need to keep our country, our border, and our communities safe. Yeah.
Yeah, David, thank you. So you just had a lunch for that Secret Service director had joined. Can you shed some light on what the conversation was and also where you think your conference is with regard to giving the $1 billion for the border?
Right. So the question I think that he was addressing was how is the money going to be used, the $1 billion. And so he walked through the various categories, and about 20% of that is going to be used to secure the modernization of the East Wing. Most of it's going to be used for other purposes, training facilities, for technology, lots of other things that law enforcement, particularly in this case the Secret Service, needs to ensure that they keep our president and other top officials safe. So it was a good back and forth, a good discussion, and obviously we had a lot of questions that were asked by our colleagues, just to get the details and precision as much as possible about how dollars are going to be used. And I think that the director did a very good job of laying it out and developing the case for why these resources need to be used to update, modernize, and make sure the security service is capable of doing its job. Or Secret Service, I should say. Yeah.
Are you confident that the $1 billion for ballroom security, White House security, will survive a Byrd rule challenge in front of the parliamentarian?
Well, we're having those discussions. As you all know, the parliamentarian who evaluates any proposal under reconciliation, we have a back and forth, and that's underway right now. So we are having the, quote, Byrd scrub and making the arguments in front of the parliamentarian. The Democrats obviously doing their best to try and undermine anything that we're trying to accomplish here. But I'm pretty confident based on past experience, because we dealt with this significantly, in a significant way, I should say, last summer during the Working Families Tax Cuts legislation. Some of these funding issues came up then, and there was a formula, frankly, that was put in place by the Democrats with the two reconciliation bills that they did when they had unified control of the government, that has given us the roadmap, if you will, to get this done. So I'm confident that we will be in good shape, but that process right now is underway.
Where are Senate Republicans at currently on getting the Save America Act passed? There was quite a bit of momentum on that a few weeks back. It seems like it sort of dwindled despite overwhelming support from the American people. Where do you stand on that currently? Would you reconsider getting rid of the filibuster to get it across the finish line?
We don't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. We called it up on the floor March, I think, 17th. We were on it for several weeks and had a very spirited debate. In fact, I think with the exception of maybe a couple of Republican senators, made more speeches on the floor in support of the SAVE Act than almost any other senator. And we had some votes on it. And we voted on the narrow issue, which is the most popular one, of voter ID. And we put the Democrats on the record. Every single Democrat voted against it. We added, and one of the other elements, also popular, was whether or not biological boys ought to play in girls' sports. We had that vote, and every Democrat voted against that as well. So we've taken what I think are probably the two issues, in my view, that have the broadest public support and put the Democrats on record, and every single one of them voted against it. So we'll look for opportunities to get other votes. There was a vote on the budget resolution, an amendment that Senator Kennedy offered that didn't even get 50 votes on the floor. And so we're continuing to look for opportunities to advance that legislation. Obviously, it's something that I support. I think we all support, and we think it's something that the American people are broadly supportive as well.
There's ballroom fighting between the courts about whether or not the ballroom can be constructed, and they've been asking for some kind of congressional authorization to move forward with the courts have. Do you consider this $1 billion in this reconciliation bill to be the congressional authorization that the courts would need to be able to go forward with the construction of the ballroom in East Wing?
If this gets litigated, you're talking about?
Yeah, well, so if this gets passed, do you see this as the congressional authorization needed that would be good enough
The courts.
to be able to be okay going forward with constructing the ballroom?
Well, I mean, I think that the ballroom is being financed privately, but the security associated with it is, I think, represents about 20% of what this request was. This Secret Service request, which frankly does fit perfectly within the confines of the legislation on the floor because it's the Judiciary Committee's jurisdiction. Most of that's going to go to other things. It's going to be used for training. It's going to be for updates in technology, for the number of the protectees that they have to deal with is ensuring that they have the resources to cover those people. So it's a request, much of which would be dealt with during the normal appropriations process, but because the Democrats won't allow for a normal appropriations process, is being done through reconciliation. But my assumption would be that if Congress authorizes something like this, that I assume the courts would uphold it. It's essentially us Republicans doing the work that the Appropriations Committee would normally do, and did, by the way, and reported a bill out favorably, which the Democrats subsequently walked away from, and then held up and shut down the government for 60 days or thereabouts over funding for these two agencies. So again, I think this is a perfectly normal way. It's not normal, but it's certainly within the confines of what we are allowed to do to get funding for this important agency done, given the obstruction that the Democrats have posed and their unwillingness to fund law enforcement.
Are you supportive of a gas tax holiday?
Am I?
Are you supportive of it?
Well, I'm listening. I mean, I think right now, you probably know I've not in the past been a huge fan of previous attempts, although when this was tried during the Biden administration, gas prices were going up largely in response to the Biden energy policies. This obviously is a very different set of circumstances, but if the president wants to make that case, I think we're all willing to hear it. We've had some of our colleagues who've come out in support of repealing, or at least temporarily repealing, the gas tax, but obviously that has implications for the Highway Trust Fund, and so those are things that you have to take into consideration as well. And the question, of course, I always ask is, if you did, it's 18.4 cents, I think, is the federal gas tax. If you lifted that, does that ultimately get passed on to the consumer, to the customer, to the buyer out there, or does it get sucked up in the supply chain somewhere? So I think those are all fair questions to ask, but it's a conversation that I think we're willing to have, and I'm certainly willing, and I think most of our colleagues are, to hear the president's arguments if that's a case he wants to make to Congress. Thank you all. Thanks.
All right, we're back here in the studio after hearing from John Thune there, speaking about $1 billion that will now be attempted to sort of pass through via reconciliation. It is a strategy that is used in Congress that bypasses the need for 60 votes from the Senate. This is something that we reported on earlier this month, because Congress passed through a spending bill for the Department of Homeland Security that did not include funding for ICE and Border Patrol. So now they are pushing for funding for ICE and Border Patrol in a different way, and the strategy through which they're going to get that passed without making the requested regulations that Democrats have been pushing for, and the reason that funding hasn't already passed through, the reason they're going to be able to push this through without doing that is by using reconciliation. Now, you notice how he was asked about debates with the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian must evaluate any proposal under reconciliation. That's part of the reason that it takes so long, and he mentioned how they dealt with this last summer in getting that tax cut legislation passed. So that massive tax cut legislation that we saw that had wide-ranging impacts on a number of programs, that was passed using reconciliation. So a lot going on here, and they did mention how a portion of that money will go to the East Wing renovation project over at the White House, which is also a project that has come under a great deal of scrutiny. So we will continue to observe the Senate and the House of Representatives as they look to pass this this spending program through using reconciliation, which again circumvents the need for certain Democratic votes in the Senate because they don't have enough votes to get to the 60 as of right now. Okay, we're going to take a commercial break here. When we get back, we've got a couple other live events that we want to look at. Okay, we are back here in the studio. I want to do an update on something quickly here. I want to mention that it appears as though that same podium that John Thune was at is all set up for Senate Democrats to speak at. And so once a Senate Democrat, likely Chuck Schumer, it's usually Chuck Schumer, once they take that podium, we will go out live back to Capitol Hill. For the time being, we're going to stay in Washington, D.C., but instead we're going to go live to FBI Director Kash Patel testifying on the 2027 budget request. Let's listen into that now.
Work together at speeds that have never been delivered before. With your continued support, this FBI stands ready to continue this great work, and I stand ready to answer any and all questions from you. And categorically, Mr. Vice Chairman, when you say there's credible reporting, just because you say it's credible doesn't make it so. This FBI is doing a historic level of crime reduction across the country. I'm proud to lead it. And if you want to cite media reporting to discredit the men and women of the FBI, go right ahead. The target's right here. The mission has never been more successful.
Administrator Terrence Cole, Drug Enforcement Agency.
Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Van Hollen, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. It's an honor to be here during National Police Week when we recognize the men and women of law enforcement who have given their lives in the line of duty. I appreciate your continued support of the Drug Enforcement Administration and nearly 9,000 professionals who carry out the mission across the United States and around the world. As a law enforcement veteran of more than 30 years, I come before you with a straightforward message. The threat we face today is unlike anything we've seen before. The DEA's mission has never been more urgent. Fentanyl continues to kill Americans at alarming rates. It's not just another drug threat, it's a weapon of mass destruction. Measured in American lives lost every day, it's produced and distributed by transnational criminal organizations that have industrialized death for profit. The Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels, now designated foreign terrorist organizations, are driving this crisis. They operate as a global enterprise. They use sophisticated supply chains, financial networks, and technology to move poison into our communities. They are well-funded, highly adaptive, and relentless. We have to be just as relentless in our response, and DEA is leading the fight. We're taking the fight directly to these organizations with aggressive, intelligence-driven enforcement. Our focus is clear: target leadership, break their command and control, disrupt supply chains, hold accountable those who profit from the addiction and death, including the global networks that supply precursor chemicals to make fentanyl production possible. And we are delivering results. In one recent coordinated surge, DEA and our partners made more than 600 arrests. We seized hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl, multi-ton quantities of cocaine and meth, hundreds of firearms, and more than $11 million in U.S. currency. Across our fentanyl operations, we've made thousands of arrests tied to trafficking networks, seized millions of fentanyl pills, removed hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl powder from circulation. Those numbers translate directly into lives saved. We're also seeing an impact at our community level. In one city alone, targeted operations with our partners led to the reduction in violent crime of more than 1/3, and a significant amount of drugs and firearms taken off the streets. Drug trafficking drives violence. When we dismantle these networks, we're not just removing drugs, we're making communities safer. We're also focused on the financial side of this fight. We're going after the money, including the use of cryptocurrency and other tools that these organizations rely on to move and hide profits. Our reach is both global and local. DEA operates in 82 offices across 62 countries and maintains a presence of 26 field divisions with more than 200 offices here at home. This allows us to attack the problem from source to the street. We do this work with discipline and accountability. DEA's workforce is a driven agency. We have nearly 9,000 employees on board against an authorized level of nearly 9,700 employees. That includes just over 4,000 special agents on board compared to nearly 4,800 authorized. We prioritize putting people where they have the greatest impact, on the front lines. We're also careful stewards of the taxpayers' resources. More than 80% of our budget supports mandatory costs like salaries. Only a small portion is available for operational work. That means every operational dollar has to count, and it does. We prioritize keeping agents in the field, focus our resources on action that dismantles organizations and removes drugs from our community. We measure success by impact, networks disrupted, communities protected, lives saved. The President's budget reflects confidence in that approach. It supports DEA's mission, our results, and our stewardship of resources entrusted to us. At the same time, the threat continues to evolve. These organizations move fast. They exploit global supply chains, digital platforms, and financial systems. To keep the pace, DEA has to strengthen its capacity in intelligence, data, and technology. This means giving our agents and analysts the tools to connect information, identify networks, and act quickly. It means improving how we share intelligence with federal, state, local, tribal, and international partners. And it means making sure our workforce has what it needs to do the job. This is about enabling investigators to get out from behind the desk and onto the streets, where they have the greatest impact. Our mission is simple: protect Americans and save American lives. We do this by enforcing the law, dismantling organizations driving this crisis, and working with our partners across.
Okay, Chuck Schumer has taken the podium on Capitol Hill. Let's listen in to the senator.
Pictures with these brave Americans that brings us all together at a time of such disunity. So there was a great joy at the end of our caucus when the 4 great astronauts walked in. Now to a more serious matter. Not more serious, but less happy matter. If you want to understand Republican priorities, just look at their reconciliation bill. Prices are rising. Families are hurting. Americans know exactly who is making it worse. A CNN poll this morning said 77% say Trump has raised their costs. What is the GOP response? $1 billion ballroom. Fancy, gold-plated. It's outrageous. Only 30% of the people approve of Trump's handling of the economy. Americans are distressed. Their economic situation in 3 words: uncertainty, stress, dread. It's true. Families gather at the dinner table after a meal and dread looking at the bills and saying, how are they going to pay this one and not this one? Which one should they pay? Which one shouldn't they pay? And when you think of the needs, for instance, of your kids or maybe your elderly parents and you can't really do what's needed for them, it's dread and ache. What are Trump and the Republicans doing about these awful conditions? Not lowering grocery costs, not lowering gas prices or housing or electricity or health care costs. Nope. What are they doing? Instead of cleaning up the chaos they created, Republicans are pushing a bill that pours billions more into Trump's raids and masked agents and sticks taxpayers with a bill for Trump's $1 billion ballroom. $1 billion ballroom. These are the ballroom Republicans. At the very moment Americans are pleading for relief, Republicans are telling them, pay for Trump's palace first. This bill has $0 to lower costs for families. Here's their second reconciliation bill. It's their second chance to show what they got. They got nothing for the American people and a ballroom for Donald Trump. The bill has $0, as I said, for reducing costs to families, but somehow comes up with $1 billion for Trump's vanity project. Trump said not one penny of federal money would be used for the ballroom. Well, give me a break. Another lie. There's lie after lie after lie, and the American people are wise to it. These Republicans, these ballroom Republicans, are choosing Trump's chandelier over your child care, Trump's ego over your electric bill, Trump's palace over the people's priorities. Did everyone hear that alliteration? Americans want relief. Americans are answering and saying, give us relief. But the Republicans just say, we were going to give you a ballroom. That's not leadership. That's Versailles economics, brought to you by the Ballroom Republicans. Democrats will fight this bill tooth and nail. We're already filing bird rule challenges. We'll offer amendments, and we'll force Republicans to vote again and again on one simple question. Are you with working families, or are you with Trump's ballroom? Americans don't want a ballroom blitz. They want Congress to bring the cost down. And on the War Powers vote tomorrow. Tomorrow, Republicans face another major choice. For the 7th time, Senate Democrats will force a vote on our War Powers resolution to withdraw American troops from hostilities with Iran. This is the first vote since Trump's war crossed the 60-day threshold under the War Powers Act. Once the 60-day clock runs out, the president has two choices: get authorization from Congress or end the hostilities. Donald Trump's done neither. He has dragged America into an illegal, costly war with no authorization, no clear objective, no end in sight. The administration can play word games all it wants. They call it a skirmish, a mini war, a blip, a love tap. They said this is a love tap. Give me a break. This is a war. You just can turn on your television, look into your iPhone, and you'll see it's a war. And Hegseth just said it out loud again. Quote, "We are 74 days into this." That was his quote. And Americans are paying for it. Service members are in harm's way. Families are getting hit at the pump. And gas prices are now over $4.50 a gallon. Trump started this war, and families are paying for it every time they fill up at the tank. Republicans will have their 7th chance to do the right thing, the first since the 60-day deadline passed. They can stand up and do their job for their constituents. They can protect our service members. They can help stop the chaos driving up costs. Or they can keep backing Trump's war. There are no excuses left. No president should be able to drag this country into war alone. Not now, not ever. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Chuck. So this morning, the inflation report was out, and inflation rose 3.8%, the highest of Donald Trump's presidency. Energy prices are through the roof. Groceries are up. Housing is up. Prices are so high that for the first time in years, they've wiped out the wage growth that Americans have earned. I was just on a tour of western Minnesota, in towns from Marshall to Litchfield to Wilmer. They may not just roll off your tongues, but I can tell you right now the last thing that those people want funded right now is a ballroom. I met with them about child care, businesses who are going to be unable to hire employees. They want to hire them. The employees want to work for them, but they don't have child care. Gas prices now in Minnesota that have tended to be a little lower than the rest of the country, but they've now gone up over $4. Diesel prices up over $5. Farmers already hit by the tariffs. Now it costs more to bring their goods to market. And now you have fertilizer prices, and I'm going to have to leave right after this because Senator Bozeman and I are doing a hearing on fertilizer prices. 50% of the urea that goes into fertilizer goes through the Straits of Hormuz. 30% of the ammonia, that's another ingredient, goes through the Straits of Hormuz. Then you add to that the tariffs on fertilizer with other countries. You can imagine what's happening. As I've told you before, as one farmer called it, it is a perfect storm of ugly. So what do we have before us? Are we working on that? No. It's another reconciliation to write yet another blank check for ICE. $70 billion plus this money for the ballroom. They want to spend this money on ICE, and I don't think they must be talking to the people that I'm talking to out in these small towns, because I can tell them what $70 billion would pay for. 200,000 local law enforcement officers for 3 years. Having talked to local sheriffs, that's something that people need. Extending the health care premium tax credits for 2 years, not just 1 year, 2 years. Providing seniors with dental, vision, and hearing coverage through Medicare for an entire year. building 700,000 affordable homes. That's what we could do with that $70 billion, and providing child care for 3.5 million children. So the question before us is simple. Where do you want to spend that money? On a gilded ballroom or on health care? On ICE, when they won't even do any reforms and they got this huge increase that made ICE bigger than the Marines and bigger than the FBI, do you want to spend more on them, or do you want to spend it on housing? The American people have answered, and that is why the president's approval ratings are lower than they've ever been, and so many polling places have had to actually add a quintile to where he stands on running the economy, because it is now in the low 30s. With that, I turn it over to Senator Merkley.
Well, the families of Oregon and America, they're pressed to the wall. I held 9 town halls throughout eastern Oregon over the break, and people are pretty unhappy. They're unhappy that in Oregon, gas is over $5 a gallon, diesel's over $6 a gallon. They're unhappy that the health care costs went up and that the tax credits that helped them pay for it went away. They're unhappy that the groceries are up. They are unhappy about the cost of rent and home ownership going up. They're unhappy because they are pressed to the wall. And what is the Republican answer to all of this? The ballroom boondoggle. A Louis XIV massive edifice that turns the White House into an auxiliary dwelling unit. This is hardly the vision for a democratic republic, possibly the vision for a dictator, possibly the vision for a strongman, possibly the vision for an authoritarian state, but not a vision for a democratic republic. And the rest of their bill doesn't do a damn thing for those health care, gasoline, housing, grocery costs, or inflation going up at 3.8%, the highest rate in 3 years. There's something else going on here that's important to address. The Republicans are turning reconciliation into an appropriations bill process. You know, reconciliation was passed by every single senator voting for it. Not one was against it. Why? Solely it was reserved for reducing deficits. Well, Republicans nuked it. They did a nuclear option back in 1996, and they said, you know what? We can now use this to increase costs, increase deficits rather than decreasing them. A massive violation of how 100 senators had come together. And they did that so they could do tax bills. But now, tax bills that gave away our treasury, the richest Americans, but now they're proceeding to say, we will just do regular appropriation bills. We are going to fund ICE and CBP a massive amount, even though ICE and CBP are already sitting on $103 billion of unobligated funds, funds that will never be exhausted during this coming financial year. And they're doing it for this ballroom boondoggle. Recognize that neither of these was essential, $103 billion of unobligated funds for ICE and CBP. And why not go through the regular appropriations process if you want to build a ballroom? Well, so this is something that we will see reverberating for years to come, the steady destruction of the norms and processes of the Senate, destroying bipartisan collaboration on spending bills. An important point to note. But more important at this moment, all this being done not to give a single penny to help a single family on a single issue where they're pressed to the wall.
Okay, so a lot of discussion over that Republican spending. You heard John Thune advocating for it, and now Democratic lawmakers arguing against it. And is specifically talking about that ballroom that President Trump wants to build, those improvements to the East Wing that he wants to make, $1 billion worth of improvements. You heard Senator Klobuchar talking about other things that money could be used for. So this is a fight that we expect to continue even as Republicans enter into reconciliation to get that spending passed. Now, we're going to take a quick break here. We have been talking all day about Frontier Airlines and the flight that hit and killed an individual on the runway yesterday. We are going to get to that right after this break. We apologize for the delay on that reporting. We've just had so many live events today, but we'll be right back with that Frontier Airlines press conference. Okay, welcome back to Live Impact News. Before we even got to Taylor Stephenson with weather, right off the top today, we spoke about this press conference featuring officials from Frontier Airlines. We did not get a chance to go to it because live events just kept happening. They're still happening, but because we talked about it, we want to make sure we include this for anyone who was hoping to hear. So let's go to this pre-recorded press conference regarding Frontier Airlines. That plane tragically crashed into an individual on the runway. Many questions about how and why that person was there. Let's see if we get any answers in this press conference here.
With the Denver Manager of Public Safety and the Denver Police Chief, Mr. Ron Thomas, who is here today. He will now give you an overview of the investigation itself. Chief.
Good morning, and thank you, Phil. As introduced, I'm Denver Police Chief Ron Thomas. What I understand at this time is Denver Police Department officers responded to assist DEN airport operations at approximately 1:20 in regard to this incident. Upon arrival, we assisted DEN ops, Denver Fire, and paramedics by securing and then evaluating the scene. Once the scene was secured, Denver Police homicide and crash investigators responded to assist with the investigation due to their experience with death investigations and documenting large scenes. As a standard practice, we reviewed available surveillance footage and obtained statements from witnesses along with gathering evidence from the scene. We then began partnering with the medical examiner to determine to complete the death investigation. As we speak, investigators are out continuing to contact family and others who knew him to see if there are additional information that we can learn about his motivations. So a bit of a call to action. Anyone who may have known him or may have been in contact with him just prior to this incident, please reach out to the Denver Police Department. Going forward, the Denver Police Department's Airport Police Division will be continuing to work with DEN operations to review and evaluate this incident, to include any perimeter security concerns. In closing, I too want to acknowledge that this was an incredibly difficult and traumatic situation for a lot of people, and my heart goes out to all of them as they process what they experienced. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Thomas. I'm going to talk a little bit about safety at DEN. Let me say very plainly, safety is paramount in everything that we do. It is paramount in the aviation industry in general, and it is definitely paramount here at DEN. After significant events or incidents such as this, or even incidents that do not rise to this, we conduct after-action reviews to identify areas for improvement, and we will do that here as well. As such, we will perform an incident analysis and an after-action review in the coming days. We have already started that, and they will include reviewing the ongoing investigation, including our perimeter security program. Safety is something that we take very, very seriously. In fact, we have received perfect scores on multiple FAA safety inspections, which includes validation of airfield safety and perimeter integrity. DEN's perimeter fencing meets TSA regulatory guidance. After the incident, we examined the fence as we do on a regular basis and found it to be intact in that area of the incident and surrounding areas. Our overall security approach is a layered one. DEN has multiple layers of security. We use technology. We conduct continuous perimeter fence inspections. We have security patrols. We have multiple tools deployed at our disposal to lower the likelihood or to prevent a security breach. Even so, it doesn't necessarily mean we can eliminate them all. Specifically in terms of the perimeter fence, we have 36 miles of fence line within our 53 square miles of airport property. Here, Denver International Airport is the second largest airport by landmass, second only to the airport in Saudi Arabia. Security officers and Denver police patrol the airfield regularly.
Okay, still many questions in that incident in Denver with Frontier Airlines. For us here on Live Impact News, we've come to the end of our stream. 13 News Now at 4 starts in an hour. We hope to see everyone back here on 13 News Now, the app, tomorrow. Thanks for joining us today, everybody.